What are the SuperCoach trades you're making this week? It's an interesting week. Some people might be forcing trades just to keep that upgrade cadence moving and end up maybe breaking their side as a result. It doesn't feel like there's a heap of cash cows that are ripe for the picking. And speaking of ripe for the picking, some of our start of season rookies are ready to cull. But what are the best guys to bring in? We're going to work you through my top 10 trade targets this week in SuperCoach. Comment below. Let me know too. Who are the trades and the players you're looking to bring in this week? My top trade target for the week is Tristan Cherry. He is an absolute SuperCoach monster and one of the great arrivals of this new position flex. Not only has it protected us from that one poor score a week that we just don't want to have, trainer from a few weeks ago. Now again, we're getting 40s, 50s, 60s falling off our SuperCoach sides this week. It also opens up not only that protection of poor score, but allows us to tap into the ruck line for an extra position. And to me, if you are not one of the 52% owners of Tristan Cherry, as another 48%, you need to be making a serious look at Tristan this week. Under 600,000 now. That break even is ridiculous given what he can do. And even in difficult matchups, just like he did last week, he's knocking out big 150s. He's well and truly back. That difficult fixture that started the year is much easier over the next 3 months in comparison to the first 2 months of the season. And that injury that he suffered against the Crows, both those two variables have gone. And if you have the option to trade into Tristan, to me, this is the peak. Now, whether or not you're doing it via a Tom De Koning, that's an interesting discussion that I think should at very least be looked at, because you put those two side by side, not drastic price differences, certainly not compared to where they were at the start of the year. I think we'd all agree that Tristan outperforms Tom every single week. So is that the right play as you look to try to maximize scoring and cash generation and team value? Maybe, maybe not, but definitely it is a play. Look, if you don't have a Flynn in your flex spot and you're already a Gorn and TDK or a Nank and a TDK or an English and a TDK, this could be a legitimate play. To me, you don't get many better SuperCoach scorers than Tristan. And if you're not an owner, this feels like the prime time, because I can see as early as next week, he's back over that $600,000 range. One of the best buys last week is still very attainable this week. I'm talking about my number 2 trade target, Christian Petracca. Break even of 70, still only 10, 12, 13, 14, 15% of coaches are on him right now, which is scandalously low given his historical pedigree. But you're not getting much more value out of him. One of the things that would be really driving coaches to jump into him this week is the fact that when you trade into these guys that are the value premiums, and without doubt, Christian is a value premium, even more so pronounced that he's a forward eligible one, is you always want to be trading into these premiums when they're going to have a spiked week, or at least a projected spike week performance. He had that last week against Richmond, which was the optimum time to trade into him. But different teams are in different upgrade and trade cadence and strategy moments. It's still time. He's under 500K. He won't be there this time next week, but he's got a match up against West Coast, which again, very, very favourable. The days of 120, I feel, are beyond him, but if we can get him as that sort of 100 to 105 territory forward, which is right within his wheelhouse, then at the price you're paying at under 500,000, it's absolutely a value buy, and you're going to get a really nice, favourable matchup to boot. Does get a little harder for Melbourne, but this is probably, if you're on track, this is the time to get him. If you didn't get him last week, he's still ripe for the picking. My number 3 trade target is a guy that went up about 25% ownership across the format last week. It's not too late, but you have missed about $80,000. I'm talking about Matthew Flynn. Matt's been outstanding in the games that he's played. His brilliance and his ability to score in a favorable way that SuperCoach has a bias and a weighting towards is perfect here. It's rare you get a guy that's priced at 341,000, which he is, that has got an average in the triple digits, which he does, and has such a high negative break even. There is absolutely a world that if he can knock out a couple more 90s, which is well and truly within his scope, given what he's shown in these few games that he's played beforehand, we're talking about a guy that's going to jump up towards $500,000 in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And that's awesome value at a time where we're all scratching our heads looking, what do we do? Am I jumping early on a cash cow? Who's got the best job security? Where should I be looking? Can we go a week early before a guy gets on a bubble? How do we get creative here? Matt presented that for us last week with undeniable value. He's still kind of there, but the reason he's so high in my trade targets this week is, where else are you trying to generate cash? Who else over the next 2 to 3 weeks could generate you $150,000? There's not too many players that can do that. Matt is. Now, he's already done 80,000 for his owners, so they're already well and truly ahead of the curve. But for those that are looking for creative ways to generate cash and open to a new possibilities, I encourage you, take a look. Could this be the way that it gets you there? Don't break your team. Don't force something structurally that isn't going to naturally fit. But if you're not loving any of the downgrade options, if you don't trust the job security of certain guys that have presented over the last week or two, then maybe, just maybe, there's an opportunity to get a little creative with some of your trades. Again, be smart, be calculated, make sure you've got logic behind it. But put all those things together. I think Matt Flynn could be a really nice trade target. It's a little higher than I normally like, but beggars can't be choosers. We don't have a lot of great rook options this week presenting. Even next week, I'm not too sure just yet at time of recording. Haven't had any new debutantes announced yet. Maybe by the time you're watching this, that is a different story. But look, Matt's just a really good money maker and favoured. And some might say, oh, he's going to get monstered against Gordon. Yeah, well, he got monstered last week against Meek, and he's still turned up. He's as good as any West Coast ruck they've got. And I would argue that West Coast, at least their midfield, has functioned better over the last fortnight with him back in the side. So to me, that he's as likely to hang around as anybody else. So to me, he sits in that spot. My number 4 trade target is Harry Sheezel, 562,000. That break even and that average have nicely united now. And the reason he needs to be spoken about, and many of you probably already have him, given the fact that his ownership isn't around that sort of 60%, is the fact that if you don't, you're getting to that critical tipping point where now, okay, you're not paying that peak price that you were at the start of the year. He's had some positional volatility, but now the last couple of weeks, back at halfback. Port Adelaide are one of the more restrictive teams to score against, and he knocked out that huge 130 for us last week. If he's staying in this halfback role, and that's the big premise, if he's staying in that halfback role and at this price point you choose to ignore him, this could really sting, because he's got the potential to go on a run of 130 over the next 6 weeks. I know one of those weeks includes a buy in there. Add 100,000 to his price point, which is really difficult to go up that big at 560 odd K already, but he's got that scoring potential to go up another 100K to deliver a 130 average over a 5-6 week stretch. And given his high ownership, punishing. So to me, this is really optimum time to get Harry. Good matchup this week. There's some favourable ones either side of the bye for him as well. If at any point of the year you've wanted to get your hands on Harry, this feels like as good a time as any to become a Harry Sheezel owner. And then I wanted to go a little unique for you in at my number 5 trade target spot. I've already given you a real cheap ruck, and I use real cheap. He's in the 300,000s. I'm giving you one that's towards the top of the tree, and Cherry is my number 1 trade target. But maybe you don't want to get into Flynn. Maybe you're worried about the job security. I'm not, but maybe you are. Maybe you're already a Cherry owner and you're like, MJ, it doesn't bother me. But you do think you could maybe look at some other ways of improving your team. Well, could it be my number 5 trade guy is perfect for you? I'm talking about Rowan Marshall. 451,000. That average of 90 is well beneath his ability of what he's shown over the last couple of years, but it's also a break even in the 60s. This guy is about to start making some coin. Could the creative trade that you look at this week, just putting it out there, is a Tom de Koning who's looked a little sore, who's battled away well over the last 7 weeks and has, at least on paper, a difficult matchup against a Riley O'Brien. The Crows are very restrictive with opposition rucks, or at least have been for big chunks of this year already. Could you make a little bit of cash off a TDK down to a Marshall and potentially end up with a comparable, if not better, performing ruck and make yourself some cash on the way? Well, jump into that flex spot and really maximize it. A fit and healthy Rowan Marshall, we know, is a 110 to 120 plus SuperCoach scoring ruck. And we've seen that even this year, that when it's on his day, he's dominant. The arrival of Isaac Keeler has added a new dimension to this team. I actually think it helps Rowan a little bit because he can then rest forward, take the odd mark, kick the odd goal. I like this as a play. I don't think it's for every team. There is a risk component to it because, as I've clearly got in my rankings, I'd rather get into Flynn for the money and not be too far off from a scoring component, at least what we've seen as the year trend with Marshall versus Flynn. But if you already own Flynn, you already own Cherry, and you're like, MJ, I don't want to jump into a Tunstall who's a sub-risk, let alone not best 22. I don't want to get into a Hustwaite, for example, who I think's only got a 1 month job security, but I need to make some money somehow, somewhere, and not sacrifice my scoring on the way. Rowan could be the guy. So that's my top 5 of my top 10 trade targets. It's Cherry, it's Petracca. I've got Flynn for you, I've got Sheezel for you, and then I've got Rowan Marshall. You want to know my number 6? Jedd Busslinger. Yeah, it's going early, unquestionably. And it's not amazing with an average of 57. But the reason you're jumping here is twofold. You absolutely certain you want to keep that acceleration in your trade plans. You want to keep the upgrade cadence continuing to evolve, and you want to be able to free up the cash of one of those rookies defenders that are very much ripe for the picking. The Trainer, the Pryor, and the Reed. Arguably, you could wait a week on, or even 2 on all of them. But if for whatever reason you're like, MJ, I need to access their cash this week to be able to get up to a premium defender, to be able to get that mid guy that I want to get, whomever and however it is, this is the play. What's his job security like? Well, not great, but here's what I do know. The Bulldogs won well on the weekend, and they probably would not make any significant change, because as much as Jed got beaten at a couple of key moments and was a bit raw in a couple of moments, they beat the Giants in one of their home decks. And so I would argue that Jed will certainly be given at least the next 1, if not 2 weeks. But there's always a risk profile in SuperCoach when you jump into a guy and spend one of your very valuable trades. I know it feels like you've got a ton when you're still sitting with 20 plus, 25 plus, some even have 30 trades at the moment. You're going, yeah, I'm fine. They'll exist. I'll be totally fine. I've got plenty of value. I'll be fine. Every trade must improve your team. So there's always a risk component about trading into a guy, not just 1 week early, but early in the price cadence, that you're not accessing cash improvement, because the worst thing that could happen is he plays this week and then he's a dead rook and doesn't play beyond that. That's the worst. However, if I was to trade into anybody under $120,000 at time of recording of players I know right now that are going to play, Jed will play this week. So he's the best of the downgraders. I think he's got the best job security of all of them. I mentioned Hustwaite there. As good as he was on the weekend, Nash is back in 3 weeks. Okay, so you get 2 price movements guaranteed out of Hustwaite, and he's not coming back in. He's not beating Ward. He's not beating McKenzie. As good as he was, he's behind those guys. Day's still away, and he only got in because 2 of their first choice mids are in. So for me, I'm not a huge fan of it because, yes, Jed's replaced a guy that's fit in Jones, but generally I would trust that as long as he keeps delivering, he should keep staying in the side, whereas Hustwaite feels like a ticking clock that I've only got 2 price movements at best out of him. So probably not someone I'm super keen on. Who's my number 7 trade target? Dylan Moore. I talked about him last week on the SuperCoach trade targets. I want to bring him back on the radar for you this week. 6% owned. His break-even and his average are very much aligned now. So this is the optimum time to bring him in. He's about 70,000 cheaper than a Christian Petracca. And some might argue that there might only be 5 points per game from here on difference between the two, especially given how favourable this Hawthorn fixture is over these next couple of weeks. So do you want to save 70k? Do you believe there's not too much separating the two? Dylan has shown he's got that capacity to hit 150s, really big SuperCoach scores. It's also shown the capacity to give us 50s. But what do you want? Is this the right play for you? He always finds a way to get into that mid to high 90s as a seasonal average from now to the end of the year. He's unique. He creates separation. He's got a great fixture. I think it's a legitimate one you should look at. I still like Petracca more over the totality of the season, but I don't think the gap between the two is as big as people may believe. And that extra $70,000 that you might be saving, remember, Petracca's at $497 while Moore is in at $429. Is that extra $70,000? Does that help you more in 2 or 3 weeks' time? If it does, maybe this is a better play for you. If you're like, no, I just want who I think is going to be the better scorer from round 8 to 24, then to me it's track. But if you want to play the fixture game, you want to play the value game, you want to trust what you've seen over the last couple of years that he's a high 90s guy, yep, there's going to be some lows, but there's going to be some highs. I do like Dylan Moore as a trade. And then my last 3 trade targets for you this week, Nazih, Wangan, Millerer. The 130 break even probably means he's going to dip in price a little bit. But what he's been able to do this year for us is a couple of things. One of them, and the most pronounced, is we've started to see a SuperCoach ceiling out of him that historically we haven't. We know he's been a really good low basement impact guy, that we're not getting these 50s and 60s out of him. You're rarely seeing him drop under 85 or 90 over the last couple of years. Well, this year he's added some of that ceiling, and that's come through a little bit more increased volume of the ball, but also just some parts of how Ross Lyon is choosing to use him. A couple of weeks ago in Gather Round, played him in that last quarter off the forward line, kicks multiple goals. And then last week, we've seen it in other matches as well. When they need a clearance at centre bounce, they've thrown Nazih in the second half, and he's won the ball, he's won clearance, and he's used it well by foot. So we're seeing a new part of his game being unlocked. And great news is that clearly wherever Naz is, Ross Lyon's putting him in positions where they desperately need his impact. Clearly a high value asset, as they absolutely should be viewing him as. But is he cheap? No, it is not a buy low option at all. It's why you contrast it to our Harry Sheezel, who's marginally cheaper and got a much more attainable break even. But with Naz, you've got a guy who's been consistent all year round and hasn't burnt you really with anything too bad on the basement side. So I do like Nazih. It's not a buy low option. You are paying for a guy who's probably going to dip, albeit only a few $1,000s, but he's not at a optimum price point. But he's just been so good for us this year. Sometimes when you can get these studs at under 600k, you just take that opportunity. And I actually think he's a really nice buy. Last 2 options for you. And this one, maybe it's being proactive a week ahead of probably the optimum spot. But again, we talk about buying into players that you know you want to own, getting them at the right time. We talked a few weeks ago that the optimum time in hindsight was to get Nick Dacos in the week that he came up against his perceived hardest matchup in James Jordan. And those that jumped a week early took a risk, but got incredibly rewarded for it because the break even was right, but the matchup wasn't right. And we've got another player here as my number 9 trade target that the break even is right, but the matchup isn't. My number 9 trade target is Chad Warner. Recently picked up forward status and off the back of a 120 score, his best for the year. The average of 90 is a little flattering thanks to that 120, but a break even of 79 is very attainable for a player of his ilk. The reason it's not yet, if you're playing the fixture matchup, is they have GWS. And while Toby Bedford hasn't got any big scalps over the last couple of weeks, he's definitely done some damage to the Swans. That is for sure. Now, is it Heaney? Is it Warner? That's a really great question. But I think it's probably going to go to Chad. A little bit more skill sets of Toby aligned to Chad's. But that said, Chad could probably take him forward and really punish him a little bit more. The optimum is the next week after that, because look at this Swans fixture from round 9 onwards. It actually looks really nice. And in SuperCoach, I'd be very tempted. But he's cheap. He's 461,000. If you go like, oh, man, an 80 is a bad game for Chad and the price doesn't really move, and I get a guy that could pop, sometimes it's worth taking the risk and getting the player you want and securing them the week early, because who knows what the following week will hold. So I totally get it. It's not something that's high on the advocational space. For me, I clearly want Track and more ahead of him because I think their fixtures are more favourable this week. But I do like Chad Warner. I think we're about to see the best of him. It'll be interesting to see what this midfield mix looks like with Mills very, very close to returning. Errol Goulden's not as far away as people think as well. But I think Chad's going to be a ripping pick, whether it's this week or next. Just depends what your risk profile is like. And then for probably the last time, I'm going to put him as a trade target because he's starting to just sneak up towards the higher price range. But we'll talk about him for one last time. Connor Rozee is my number 10 trade target. He's back in that halfback spot. I think it's now 3 weeks in a row that he's sitting in there. He's absolutely knocking it out. Fantasy Freako at the start of the week put out a tweet when asked a question, is he on track for picking up dual position status at the conclusion of round 11? And the tweet in response was yes. So I don't see any reason for Port Adelaide to change what has become a winning formula now over the last couple of weeks. Butters into this mid has freed up the opportunity for Rozee to be the playmaker, the distributor, the creator that they've desperately lacked with the trade of Dan Houston. And it's allowing Connor to be at his best. It's allowing Zach to be the alpha in there and giving them the freedom for the other role players to accompany that midfield with Horne-Francis and Butters beautifully. Rozee is the prototype creator of halfback. He will pick up dual position status. But outside of that, the fact is he's going 108. In the last couple of weeks as a halfback, he's been excellent and outperforming that average. He'll be up at 550k really quick. Another 120, 130 performance will certainly see him kick over that as early as this week. Still, less than 1 in 3 coaches own him, but when he picks up defensive status, he's a top line defender, and he actually does something for your buy structures. Just go and check it out. Just see what's sitting in there. His defensive mid eligibility can open up a bunch of different moves through the buys that are still, well, they're a month away now. So get in there, have a look. Is it a cheap move? No. Anyone over 500,000 is not a cheap play for you anymore. But there's some value that still sits on him, which is important. And I think he's going to be a top-line defender. Why am I so confident he's picking up defensive status? Well, they've won their last 3 games since he's been in that position. They've looked the best they have with their ball movement and the most balanced their midfield has. You put those variables together, they ain't changing squat. Barring an injury, he's going to be picking up defensive status in just a couple of weeks' time. And so those are my top 10 trade targets. Do you agree or disagree? Love to know. Comment below. Let me know what are the 2 trades or 3 trades you are planning on making this week. Perhaps you're not even thinking of making a trade because there's no rookie that you love on the bubble. There's nothing that's forcing its way out and you don't want to make something that you'll later regret. That's a viable play too. So what are your trade plans? Let me know. Comment below. If you're loving the videos you're getting out of the Coaches Panel this season proper and you haven't subscribed, why don't you click that button? It makes a huge difference for us and makes a huge support of the channel. And then make sure if you haven't already, follow us across social media, become a Patreon. All the details for those things are in the description of this episode. Hey, good luck as you head into round 8. I hope the trades you make work for you, and we can't wait to be back with you again real soon, talking all things SuperCoach here at the Coaches Panel.